what controls that ignition coil. So now when I'm looking inside the software, I know that anything to do with output compare 1 is driving the ignition coil. And because this is an engine we're talking about, there's all kinds of spinning parts. And a 4-stroke engine has to go around twice to make a power cycle. And so you have to have these little sensor things that tell the computer where the engine is and what it's doing. So these little bumps that are sticking out of the alternator rotor, they identify the crankshaft position every 60 degrees. You get an edge. And from that, you can do stuff like calculating the RPM. So you just measure the time between the bumps, and now you know the instantaneous RPM that the engine's going. Then there's the electromechanical aspects. So now that we can tell where the moving parts are, you then have to relate that to what the 4-stroke engine is doing. So which part of the rotation deals with the intake, the compression, the power exhaust. And you put that together. So you can see that there's 12 of these periods, 0 through 11, because there's 6 per rotation, and it takes 2 full rotations of the crank to complete the 4-stroke cycle. And then, of course, everyone's favorite, you have to reverse engineer the software. And this is long before they had programs like Ghidra that help you out with a lot of this stuff. This was just a pure disassembler that dumped the code into a basically impenetrable wad of machine instructions like you can see on the right. If you care, that wad of machine instructions on the right is actually checking to see if the engine is going too fast, and if it is, it cuts off the spark and the fuel, and so that you don't blow the engine up. So to put it all together, you start from the reset vector address, and you just start annotating the source code for what you can figure out. And the good part is it starts off easy. So like you can see it pretty quickly do something like clear all the RAM. And so you go, ooh, clear all RAM, and it makes you feel good. And then you can start doing harder stuff, but you got to start somewhere. So you look for code that interacts with things that you know about, like the I/O pins that you found in the schematics, the CPU registers. So the CPU is all full of stuff like A to D result registers. So if you see code that's reading ADC result registers, you can then connect that back to what sensor it was reading, and now you know that that code is dealing with that sensor. So a picture slowly develops. And I do mean slow. So a year later, I had achieved what I called a basic understanding. So I could see all the input sensors, how they got through the support circuitry into the machine, and I could see all the outputs going out. And I could see inside the code base the basic chunks of operation that was going on. So that's all well and good, but what do you do? I mean, just knowing stuff is different than doing something with it. So I had this idea that now that I knew that there was all this interesting data inside the computer, like throttle position is always very interesting. What if I could correlate that with GPS position and velocity, so I could go for a ride, and instead of thinking that I'm going 70 miles an hour in a corner, I would know how fast I was going in the corner. So that just seemed, well, it blew my mind, so I wanted to do it. So there's 2 big problems. The only output mechanism that the ECU has is the check engine light. That's it. And I suppose you could blink Morse code on it or something, but that's really not useful. And also, the whole notion of altering ECU code to get data out should be extremely scary. The ECU engine computer unit, the ECU is a hard real-time system. And if you do things wrong, you make a change, it can alter the operation of that system in ways that you just did not foresee. And they could be simple, like, oh, geez, that was weird. Or it could be, oh, geez, my engine just blew up. Or it could be, oh, geez, my engine just blew up and dumped oil on the tire, and I'm in the middle of a corner, and now I'm dead. So it's not to be taken lightly to be just making changes willy-nilly in this code. And in fact, in systems like this, change is the enemy. The ECU code base, as I was walking through it, figuring out what it was doing, it's, as I say here, a study in change avoidance. You can see all kinds of debug code in there. You can see all kinds of test code in there that's still there in the shipping product. Why? Because they don't want to change it by taking it out and then shipping it. So they ship what they test. And even that secret performance mode got disabled not by making code changes. What they did was they took all the tables that were for the normal operation and they just replicated them on top of the tables for the high performance. So it's still actually switching tables when you cut the wire. It just gets the same data. But they did that, obviously, no code changes. So from my point of view, getting the data that I wanted to get out, I needed to do it in a way that had minimal impact. So my solution was to use the EPROM memory bus. It has minimal timing impact, so I can get 23 bits of data out in 2 microseconds, which is absolutely as fast as that processor can do anything. It's mechanically accessible, meaning the EPROM's in a socket, so I don't have to be doing weird stuff to their circuit board. And it's electrically simple. It's not like I'm trying to interface to USB 4 or something like that. It's just a really simple protocol. So what I came up with, I called the write sniffer. And what I was going to do was modify the ECU firmware so that whenever it calculated something interesting, it would write that interesting thing to the EPROM address space. Then I would take a circuit board, plug it in place of the EPROM, and it would have all of its GPIOs basically connected to that EPROM, and so that it could detect the write cycle. And every time it saw a write cycle, it would just grab everything off the bus and log it. So it had to happen, and it did. That's my very first circuit board there. You might say it looks like a circuit board that was designed by a software guy. You'd be right, but you got to start somewhere. And I only mention the price now, that it cost me 50 bucks for that circuit board minimum order too. We live in the golden age of trying to make circuit boards right now. This is like obscenely expensive as compared to what you would do now. So the results of that was that the write sniffing actually worked fine, and my in-circuit reflash failed, which was a bummer. But 2 years later, you can see I have now embraced surface mount technology, so there's no more through-hole stuff. I can reflash in system. I've switched from mini SD, remember that, to micro SD. I think I went through about 3 different GPS modules, and I finally paid money and so that I could have solder mask and stuff like that, PC routing. That was important because you can see it here, there's components that stick up on the bottom, and so I had to have a pretty complicated routing path to avoid those components. And that was that. It worked. I collected data, had fun. This is an example of me somewhere in the mountains of California going 0 to 100 and a little beyond. What you can learn from this is I'm not a motorcycle racer. The green line is the throttle, and you can see that the throttle was not particularly wide open there in first gear. And there's a good reason for that. If you open it up in first gear pretty wide open, the front wheel just comes off the ground and the bars smack you in the face. So it's a beast. Yeah, so I had a great time. So I would point out that you might argue that the sniffing way of doing this was inelegant, and I wouldn't argue, but it was successful. And as I said at the start, the embedded products just need to work, barely. And so it met that bar. So if this had been a product, it would have been done long ago. But it was not a product. This is just a personal product. I'm just doing it for fun. And I had always known the right answer. And the right answer had always been a processor that was even faster, that would just pretend to be the memory. That becomes a way more elegant design. Write management is a first-class operation. And practically speaking, I can replace 2 expensive, obsolete parts with just a plain CPU. It's just that nothing existed back then that would work. So we fast forward to 2021, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this device. It's a cool new chip. Look what Moore's Law has done for us in the years since that HC11 came out in this one. It's got 2 cores, each of which running 60 times faster than what's going on in the ECU. It's got 500 times the amount of SRAM. It has 500 times the amount of flash. Downsides? Well, it's a cool new chip, and it's not 5-volt tolerant I/O. And I do need to make a point here. Cool and new is a two-edged sword. Moore's Law applies to chip docks. So if you go back to the HC11, in one manual, 195 pages long, you could learn absolutely everything you needed to learn about that chip, from how to power it, how its crystal needed to work, to its complete instruction set, everything in 195 pages. You want to get that same level of understanding of an RP2040, it's 1,500 pages that you should read. And I need to point out that I couldn't even read the 195 pages correctly because it clearly stated what I needed to do to make the in-circuit reflash work, and I didn't read it. So what, you know, I'm going to trip over something else if there's that many more pages of documentation I got to read. So the basic takeaway is that cool and new represents a significant mental investment. It's one thing if you're using the example code and making a small change to it or something like that, but if you really need to go deep on it, there's a lot of stuff you need to learn in detail to work with new chips. But it got me thinking, was it time for version 4? The dual core was a huge attraction, but the bottom line was it did not have enough I/O pins. It only had 30. And that, just being an EPROM would use up 28 of those, so it was not going to work. But then, to taunt me, they released the Pico W. And that got me thinking, well, what if I used an RP2040 and it just was the EPROM, and then I put a Pico W in and it would take over all the tasks that the other one needed to do, like working with the SD card and the GPS and stuff like that. So on the plus side, well, it would have Wi-Fi. I mean, who doesn't want Wi-Fi in their project? And that would be cool. The other cool thing was that it's identical chip. So even though it's 2 different boards, it's the same mental cost to work with both of them as opposed to just one of them. So that was good. The only con really was that it's not really 5-volt tolerant. Some people claim it is, but Raspberry Pi people will tell you not really. Close, but no cigar. But I guess my takeaway there was pretty much nothing is 5-volt tolerant these days for the new stuff, so I was going to have to do this no matter what I went with, so I just said, okay, fine. So that was super intriguing, but the bottom line was, could an RP2040 actually emulate a memory chip? And I will point out that if you just want to emulate like an EPROM, just read only, that's easy. I'm pretty sure anyone in this room could do it in one screen full of code. It's just not hard. Write cycles are the problem, catching the data off the bus at the right time. So for that, I needed a proof of concept. And if you haven't done one of those before, this is a prime example of why you would want to do one. I did not want to redesign that whole board just to test and find out that it wasn't going to work. So I wanted to do a minimal project that proved that I could actually do what I needed to do. So to that end, no custom circuit board. This thing was just going to run on a standard Pico board. And I wasn't actually trying to make a usable memory. I'm not going to connect it to anything. I'm just going to hook it up to an oscilloscope and a timing generator and make sure that it is responding at the right times that it needs to. So what are we timing? You guys are all pretty hardware, right? So I'm sure you've all, has anyone not seen a timing diagram? A couple people. One. Anyway, it's basically an API for silicon. So there's It makes promises, it asks guarantees from you. If you meet the timing, everything is guaranteed to work and you're good to go. The important takeaway from here is that all the timing units in that far right column are measured in nanoseconds. There's just not a lot of time we're talking about. So the key to success to this whole thing is going to be tracking elapsed time during a memory cycle. It's fascinating. We think of computers as being these calculating machines that do math and I don't know, geez, AI models and stuff like that. But it turns out that they are astoundingly good at managing time, especially the little tiny ones. But my big issue is that I don't have a lot of time. So it came out to about 59 processor clocks is all I'd get, and that means that it would be about 45 or so instructions. That's all I get to do. And using silicon timers is way too slow. By the time you read a timer, subtract off a time zero, compare it to a value and branch, you've already spent 4, 5, 6 instructions, and all you've done is established one point in time. So how do you do it efficiently? Well, it turns out there is a way, and it's really, really old school. It's called cycle counting. And the way it works is that you define you define some software event as time zero. So in this case, it'll be the falling edge of the E clock. That's going to be time zero. And I have a WFI instruction which wakes up as soon as it sees that falling edge. Then what you do is you track the running sum of all the instructions that you execute in your code after T0. And you track it manually as source code comments. And so for each instruction, you just track how many cycles you're at. And what you end up with is a code base where the elapsed time is synonymous with whatever instruction you're executing. You know exactly when in time that instruction is going to execute related back to time zero. So you never need to read a timer. It's simple, it's precise. The coolest part is there is zero runtime overhead, none. The cons, it takes time to do it. It only works in assembly language. Code changes, you have to go through your source code and manually recalculate all those sums. It's a pain in the neck. And also, what's interesting these days is that it requires deterministic processor execution. In the old days, all that meant was turn the interrupts off. These days, there's all kinds of stuff that can happen inside the processor that change its timing. So for example, caches, did you have a hit or a miss? The instruction takes more or less time to run. The RP2040 has this beautiful, massive bus fabric inside it where it routes all the transactions in the chip and where they need to go. But that has the problem, of course, that maybe you have a collision in that bus fabric. So you have to watch out for stuff like that. Even these little chips, the RP2040, I don't know if you're aware, is actually slightly superscalar. There are certain situations where it can execute 2 instructions in the same clock cycle. That really messes up stuff like this cycle counting. So what I do is I redefine those API timing targets in terms of number of clocks after T0. And finally, we're ready to write some firmware. Are there any motorcyclists here? Oh, good for you. Do you know what we're looking at? I see someone nodding their head. This is no joke. This is Raleigh Free. He's riding a Vincent Black Lightning, September 13, 1948, precisely 10 years to the day before I was born. This is the Bonneville Salt Flats. You can see that black line on the ground. That is the track at Bonneville Salt Flats. They take, I guess, a truck or something, and they paint a many mile long black line, and you just stare at the black line and drive on it. That's the track. Earlier in the week, he has smashed the land speed record for 2 wheels by 13 miles an hour, and he finds himself 1.4 miles an hour short to be the first person to 150 on 2 wheels. You can see what he's done. If it wasn't necessary, it's gone. There's no seat on that bike. There's no bodywork. There's no headlight. That's a little hard to see. You might notice there's no front brake. He's trying to set the land speed record, not the land stopping record. So a front brake is not needed. And finally, those people in the front row may notice he's not wearing any safety gear. So the story goes, and he's a colorful guy, so there were a few versions of the story, but the story goes that his leathers had torn on the previous run. And they were flapping in the breeze, and he believed that that was costing him speed. So a normal person would have perhaps found someone to sew them up. His solution was to borrow a bathing suit, borrow some sneakers, and jump on the bike. And the takeaway there is when you want to go really, really fast, you sacrifice convention. You just do what it takes, whatever it takes. And he did it. So I'm going to argue that writing fast firmware is the same. You can even do it in a bathing suit and a crash helmet if you want. But basically, you start with capable hardware. I mean, you have to start there. You design for speed, ignore convention if you need to, perform relentless optimization. So if you can do anything you can to remove one more machine cycle, you do it. If you need to reorganize all your code because it will run one cycle faster, you do it. And honestly, it's my favorite challenge in all of computers is when someone gives me a thing and says it's not quite fast enough. It's like, yeah, give it to me, I'll make it go. So in this case, it's a dual core processor. Core 1 is going to run this tight emulation loop. It never touches SRAM unless it absolutely has to because touching SRAM is slow. There's no interrupts. There's no subroutines. I never call the SDK because you never know what it's going to do or what they may change behind your back. So basically, if it's executing an instruction, it's my instruction. It's one I'm asking it to do directly. But one cool part about no interrupt subroutine in SDK is that that means that the link register and the stack pointer are fair game to use for whatever you want because I can use the stack pointer. No one else is going to. So that was fun. Register allocation is the key to going fast. I limited myself to only using 3 registers to actually do all the temp stuff while the code's running. And everything else gets used to hold constants that are going to get referenced during the loop, and so that I don't have to touch memory to load those constants. They're just sitting there in registers, and I can just go bang and do what it is I need to do. In Core 0, all it does is takes this data stream that's coming out and it forwards it to the other processor. So it's totally wasted. But the problem was I only had 2 spare I/O pins, and so really all it can do is send data somewhere else. So that's what it did. Well, I don't know if you can see that, it's too small, but the takeaway there is that you can see the accounting on the far right of the screen. So the WFI instruction takes 7 to wake up, which means that by the time it's woken up, 7 cycles have gone by. The disabling of the output bus drivers takes 1 cycle, so I count for that as the 1 cycle, and then now the running total is 8. And you just go on and on and on, tracking it like that. And now you see what I mean. If I had to insert an instruction there in the middle, then all of those comments about, you know, how long stuff took, they all have to get updated manually by hand. It's a pain in the neck, but that is the cost of the 0 overhead timing or runtime. And we now get to theory and reality. So I had written the code, and in theory, it should have worked because all my accounting showed that everything should be fine. But it's always wise to test, and so I did, and so I breadboarded it, and I instantly found timing anomalies. So the WFI instruction in those 1,500 pages of documents, they said it will take 2 cycles. And it's like, okay, what does that mean? Like 1 to go to sleep and 1 to wake up? Or 2 to wake up? Or it wasn't clear. And in fact, the answer is it takes 4 to wake up. And that's not documented anywhere, but that is reality. And also acknowledging the GPIO interrupt was slower than I thought. That took 5 cycles, and I was expecting 2. It didn't matter. All you do is update the accounting, and everything still looked right, so off I went. So here's a scope view of what was going on, and you can sort of see how the various software operations are being executed in time in relation to that top trace, which is the E-clock. So it takes some time to wake up. You can finally see where it samples the data bus. That's where I drive the line low on the bottom trace. And I did this strictly so that I could see what was going on with an oscilloscope, because that's the only way to look inside at speed. You can't single step this. It doesn't work that way. So the first time the signal pops up is if the bus cycle was not for us at all. It was addressing something else on the bus, and so we can just ignore that cycle. The second time it pops up is if it was a read cycle, that's indicating that it has driven the read data to the bus. The third time it pops up is the tricky one, that's the write cycle. According to the spec, the write data you might think would appear really early in the cycle, but the answer is no. The write data is not guaranteed to be valid until extremely late in the cycle, so that last trace where it pops up is showing you that it's finally grabbing the right data off the bus. And then at the very, very end, you can see me drive it low and high. And that was just a feel-good thing because I just wanted to prove to myself that I was completely done before the start of the next cycle. And it worked, so I was good to go. Which meant I finally got to design a circuit board. So I'm pretty sure most, if not everyone in this room has designed a circuit board. Well, this was a total redesign. The only thing that really carried through were some screw hole locations and some parts of the board outline. Everything else was completely new. Because the RP2040 was so teeny tiny and my eyes are getting older, I decided to have this built at JCL PCB and have them do the assembly as well. And that was a really good decision. It worked really well. It let me use 402 parts everywhere instead of 603s because I was not going to be hand soldering them. Took 8 days. I had 4 boards, and they cost me 15 bucks each. I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm paying less these days for fully assembled boards than I was paying for bare circuit boards back when I started. So once you get a board back, you bring it up, and it is the process of validating operation. It's tough because it's one of those things where you have to walk before you run, but of course you just want to run. And you have to be methodical, you have to be thorough. There will be problems. Workarounds are the key. Anything that you can do to not have to respin that board, you do. Because if you have to respin it, it's time and money waiting for it to come back again. So in this case, I had 5 issues, all had easy workarounds. The most serious issue was that my debugger was absolutely dead. I could not put software onto the board. That was very problematic. And it turned out that I had the silk screen, the pins labeled wrong. So that was an example of an extremely easy workaround. So I took my test code, morphed it into a real code base, got ready for bench testing. I brought my bench test set up here if you want to look at it after. And all I wanted to do was just watch the HC11 boot and receive some write messages. That was all I cared about. And it actually didn't take too long, and it worked. So this was going to be a movie, but I can't do movies in PDF. So use your imagination. The motorbike starts and runs. I've probably watched this video 100 times. It always makes me happy every time I watch it. So since then, I have spun a new version of the circuit board. I fixed all the workarounds. While I was going through, you always find stuff you wish you had done differently. And so I have a list of all the stuff that I had found that I would like to change on the next version. I rolled all those changes into this next board. Someone asked me last night, how come I used a plug-in module for the processor? And the answer was exactly this. I did not know that there was going to be a Pico 2 when I started this, but Raspberry Pi helpfully came out with the Pico 2, which runs even faster, has twice as much SRAM, and all I needed to do was unplug the old Pico, plug in a Pico 2 in about 5 minutes of software, and I had an upgrade. So that's why I like plug-in modules. Another thing I did was I actually turned part of the EPROM into RAM. So it was not a difficult software issue, but what that let me do was to take the HC11 stack, and their code base had a fair bit of stacked paranoia in it. And so what I did was I took the stack and I actually relocated it into my new RAM window inside the EPROM. And that totally gets rid of all that. There is no possibility of a stack collision anymore because it just lives completely far away from somewhere else. And finally, I stuck the project in GitHub. Before I started the project, not only did GitHub not exist, Git didn't exist. So it was a long time coming. So looking forward, I do want to get the Wi-Fi stuff working. What I really want more than anything is over-the-air firmware updates. I want to be sitting downstairs in my office and just push an update to the garage and then go for a ride without having to carry a laptop up there and plug in cables and stuff like that. So I really want that. I also want, when I come home and park the bike, I want it to take the ride logs and push them onto a server without me having to do anything. So I want to take advantage of Wi-Fi. At the moment, maybe there will be a 4.2 circuit board, maybe not, I don't know. 4.1 has no issues. There's no workarounds on it. Everything works fine. So if there is a 4.2, it'll be feature driven. All of this has been done using CADSoft Eagle, just because I started using CADSoft Eagle in 2000 or something like that, and I know how to work it in my sleep. So I've been putting off moving to KiCad, but maybe now's the time. So in closing, this turned out to be a way bigger project than I ever imagined. I mean, it's been going on literally for 2 decades. I'm not done. I will never be done. I don't care. It's just, it's a source of fun, and I have fun. I don't know if, I like to tell people that good ideas beg their existence. If it's a cool enough idea, you will do it. And listen to those ideas, and if you have one, go for it. You never know where you'll end up. There you have it. That's the latest board. You know, I run the stock firmware. I have never even run the alternate maps. I could. Oh. I don't know. I think basically just figure out how slow I am. I used to live in California up Black Road at the South Bay. It's a nasty, gnarly, tight road where if you go off the road, you'll die and they won't even find you. It's like, you know, down mountain hillsides. And it's an awesome road once you get used to it. It's just spectacular. There's this one corner that is like a 90-degree up, and well, it's more than 90 degrees, but it's super sharp up at the same time. And so the data told me that I was only opening the throttle 13%. And I thought, geez, that's not very much. And so next time I went up the hill, I get to that corner, and I gave it a good deal more than 13%, and the handlebars came up and slapped me in the chin bar. So I decided that 13% was about right for that corner. I would like to get that working. I mean, Wi-Fi triggered going for the second version, so I really should try and figure out how to use it. Yes. Uh, I don't know. Well, first off, this existed before that. Um, I don't have a good answer to that. It's just the path I went down, and I'm so far down it. I'm kind of committed. I mean, kind of to answer that question, I have never had a new bike day since, because I can't sell this one. I have so much time and energy invested into it. I can't sell it.
Another round of applause, please. Thanks, Robin.